Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Tonight we're going to be talking about one of our favorite figures, I guess, and that is David Platt. So David Platt will be on the hot seat tonight as we dive into his church, its lawsuits, a lot of complicated things going on with David Platt's church. So we're going to be trying to break this down. And Anthony here wrote an article about McLean Bible Church and David Platt and a bunch of the other stuff going on over at that church. So that's going to be the backdrop for the discussion tonight. And we're going to get into that and a little bit more. So how's everybody doing tonight? And if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and also hit that like button just to help us out quite a bit. We'd appreciate that. So anyway, the McLean Bible Church, you wrote an article over at Evangelical Dark Web about the NAMB conspiracy involving McLean Bible Church. What is the highest level overview of that you can give us?
I mean, highest level overview is that McLean Bible Church essentially became an SBC church. They received a lot of monetary benefits on the back end. So they gave money up front, which is what the latest lawsuit or the latest legal filing has alleged, is that they gave $375,000. Then they received either material benefit or otherwise to their own church planning network called New City. It's called New City Church Planning right now. It was branded previously under New City Network. So basically, they gave money to the SBC. The SBC, through NAMB, would essentially help their own church planning organization. And then the lawsuit also alleges that the personnel overlap between NAMB and New City Network is undeniably them hiring an SBC employee or a North American Mission Board employee named Clint Clifton. So basically, they became an SBC church. They operated a church planning organization that was fairly SBC. They're not entirely exclusively. And this is all.
Neither is the North American Mission Board entirely and exclusively Southern Baptist.
And I do mention that. That's kind of a weakness in the complaint is that they say that they were planning exclusively Southern Baptist churches, even though the North American Mission Board does not necessarily plant majority Southern Baptist churches. And the other, I guess, angles that we've looked at is the dots of wokeness and a further liberal drift within their church planning organization, as well as a money trail, because we might have identified certain churches that received substantial loans from NAMB through the connections of New City and the DC area.
And NAMB, as we've previously covered on Evangelical Dark Web, is kind of like McDonald's. And I mean the Ray Kroc McDonald's, where it operates as a real estate company, basically. It operates real estate, and they're heavily invested in real estate. There's a lot of homes that they were buying that were materially beneficial for mega church pastors. And then you get into the fact that they have several loans going out to churches, and I can kind of see why they would attach a liability to a church they've given money to. But is that the way we should be doing missions? It pretty ethically shady, especially since NAMB is not known for disclosure.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, okay, you're not just giving out loans, you also have like $300 million in both stocks and real estate. So why are we doing loans when you clearly have the money? And it's not really a dispute that they have this kind of assets.
I mean, I would think that they're loans so they could hold churches more accountable. And if the church reneges or wants to go out the deep end, they can, make it it's on paper a forgivable loan, but then they can turn it into an unforgivable loan with terms and stuff. That's my guess. But who knows? At this point, it's the North American Mission Board. They, that's probably what's being investigated, because the Southern Baptist Convention is being investigated by the Department of Justice. And if one thing that I heard about that was it was a Southern District of New York the crown jewel of the Department of Justice that's actually doing the investigation of the Southern Baptist Convention. And the Southern Baptist Convention wants you to think this is about sex abuse and sex abuse cover up. I think it's far more likely that this is a financial thing, because it's the Southern District of New York, which is where Wall Street falls under, and the SEC, and a lot of those types of actions from the DOJ would come from SDNY. So that's probably why they're being investigated, is financial. But NAMB is just super shady. And then it ties back to McLean Bible Church, and where we broke new ground on this, because I did a little bit of the work. You did pretty much. You started the article, and I'm like, hold on, I got some little birdies here. Let me contact some birdies that I have and see what they can provide us more context, and stuff like that. So I did a little bit of intermediating between that. But you kind of pursued a different angle to the stories involving McLean Bible Church than has previously been covered by Christian media. And that was the financial aspect with NAMB, which is explicitly mentioned in the lawsuit. I know Capstone Report made explicit mention of this, but you kind of expounded upon this particular detail about the financial connection with the North American Mission Board, and broke open that, because that's probably the bigger, that's probably, their case right there, right? That, the financial connection is largely the case that they have to establish that the McLean Bible Church was against the bylaws and constitution of that church, made an SBC church.
I mean, it's probably the strongest evidence that they have. I mean, obviously, if you're giving money, then they give you a church ID number, which basically, I guess, is how they would keep track of which churches gave money. So even though they didn't file the form to become an SBC church because they sent a check,
They became a cooperating member.
Yeah, they got an account number because they gave money. They were essentially a donor. But
so we can go ahead and pull up the article, but just to do a recap on what previous coverage has established. So there's two different lawsuits involving McLean Bible Church. The first lawsuit is about the voting issue that took place this was the previous year. This is 2021 when all this went down, if I recall, where they had a vote on a slate of elders, and the vote failed the first time around. So they did a do-over vote in the middle of a sermon and cleared their voter rolls of potential dissidents, or people who were not necessarily as active in the church. And this was, I believe, I'm pretty sure this was 2021, because it had to do with, like, how do you monitor who's still attending your church when this was a church that proudly locked down and stuff. So a lot of issues going on there as far as McLean Bible Church's voter rolls going on, and how they violate their own bylaws by having a business meeting in the middle of a sermon and stuff like that. A lot of shady practices, which was the result of the first lawsuit, which I do believe was dismissed, but they've appealed the dismissal. The second lawsuit is about McLean Bible Church entering the SBC, the Southern Baptist Convention, against the church constitution, which explicitly prohibits affiliation with the denomination or convention. So this is a church constitution that is dedicated to its own church autonomy, and they violated this by going into the Southern Baptist Convention without a vote. And it's kind of bizarre, because I remember the videos at the time, because this was still, a lot of this was being talked about almost a year and a half ago, where it's like David Platt and MBC kind of lied about this connection with the Southern Baptist Convention. And then all of a sudden, and it was a very bizarre thing to lie about. You kind of made the point, I believe, at the time, that they should have just said, yeah, and said, yes, we ordered the code red. That's why you hired me. David Platt would be saying that. You hired me to become a Southern Baptist church. Of course.
Yeah, and that's kind of the catch-22 with the whole thing, is they became a Southern Baptist church in 2016, it looks like, or maybe 2017, but they were SBC before they even hired David Platt. So the people that hired David Platt wanted to make their church an SBC church. And perhaps it's because, there's some monetary benefits, because, they received SBC support for their church planning network. Perhaps they just wanted to be more involved with the missions through the International Mission Board or North American Mission Board. But regardless, they wanted to become an SBC church. They then hired David Platt. And the other thing I kind of note in the article is it looks like their longest tenured elder is like SBC trained. So I think he went to Dallas Theological Seminary, and they have a whole crop of elders that more or less did not attend the church more than 10 years ago. So they're not going to necessarily be as loyal to the long-standing bylaws that have been in place since, I want to say, 1965 or whenever the church was initially founded.
Right. And 3 of those elders came from the vote that they had a year and a half ago,
And
where
they
they
only have
got
7.
3. Yeah. So 3 of them came from that, or maybe
One
some turnover has happened since.
and one is Platt.
Yes.
So, and I can't identify how long the like the 6th one or has been going to the church, but the longest standing one is like, again, you have a lot of members that didn't attend the church prior to 2010.
Yes. And the famous point of order, as Cram points out, where the guy got kicked out for that. So, and the question is, what's going on with the lawsuit to the liberal MBC? You kind of you brought up off air, I guess, the latest update on that. You can share that.
Yeah, so Capstone reported the latest legal filing where it looks like McLean responded to the initial filing again by basically saying that the the definition of affiliation is an ecclesiastical definition or an ecclesiastical term, so therefore it's a violation of the court's, I guess, jurisdiction to rule on ecclesiastical matters. And and I kind of point this out in the article when I wrote it, which was before Capstone broke their latest story, which was a judge is likely to play it safe and rule this as an ecclesiastical jurisdiction, especially since these are members that are standing against the church, not necessarily elders, or not like one location trying to split from the mothership like a Methodist church. So I mean,
That's wild what's going on with the Methodist Church and how they have to sue in order to leave, because the Methodist Church is like, oh no, if you guys you guys are the profitable churches, you can't leave. That's what I think is going on there. It's about the money and the real
yes.
estate, but it's like all these profitable churches can't leave. We're going to go under. And I think most of the Texas Methodist churches left or something like that. So it's crazy what's going on there.
But that's kind of what the McLean church lawsuit kind of lacks, is they lack that like legal stronghold to where they could probably like mount a suit because the pastors of MBC, Gaithersburg or Rockville are are trying to separate over the SBC dispute because there's really no one in the elder or management level that's doing it. A judge might not be inclined to rule in their favor. And the other thing is, how do you undo what is now going on like 7 years of bad church polity?
Right. So how do you rectify the situation? What are the actual aims of the lawsuit? Which again is kind of tough. Are you just trying to establish a fact of the matter? Or I'm not sure what the rectification is, but again, this is kind of the pitfall of trying to sue a church to save a church. And we talked about this issue at the time on Evangelical Dark Web for sure, not in a live stream, but we talked about, if you have to sue a church to save a church, is that a church that can be saved? And, that's kind of again, with the whole, you're going to pagans to judge the church. I'm not a huge fan of that. I understand that sometimes believers have to settle things in court because there are no ecclesiastical ways to navigate the situation. That's certainly true with David Sills suing the SBC for defamation. He can't just go to Ed Litton's church on his home field advantage and get that get that favor and get them to church discipline Ed Lynn. That's not a reasonable expectation. You can't do church discipline across autonomous church lines. It just doesn't really work. The Presbyterian Church has a different model for it, but again, their model can't even get rid of someone like Greg Johnson. So it's very difficult. And then it just puts people in situations for the lawsuit land. And that's rough. And David Platt is kind of a champion at this. I don't think he's been defeated yet. And it's hard to imagine that they will lose this one, in my opinion. But nonetheless, I think what you've uncovered is perhaps a bigger story than the lawsuit itself. And this is kind of what the lawsuit's trying to get at. But from a journalistic standpoint, it's a much bigger issue that they've taken all this money to partner with the SBC for their own church planting mini NAMB. And then they've left the SBC. Supposedly, you do go on to say that they've disaffiliated, right?
I would say distance. Like their church planting organization is kind of distancing itself from McLean, and then they're also distancing themselves from Southern Baptist, I guess, doctrine. So they're essentially, instead of becoming a NAMB, they're trying to become more like an Acts 29, which I would say is a theological downgrade. So it's kind of like okay, we're going to satisfy you by becoming even more liberal in our
All right.
drift.
Well, let's hop into the article that you wrote, since that's the backdrop for tonight anyway. And let's just kick it off, because I think we talk a lot about, I think the hypothesis that you pose is that they've actually downgraded is, to me, the story, to me, that's kind of a major story. They've actually gotten worse as a result of this. So we do have our handy dandy conspiracy flow chart, which is a nice visual to help explain all this.
Yeah, and I titled it a joint venture with NAMB just because that's, in business, when two entities go into business with each other, they might form what's called a joint venture. So essentially, New City Church Planting was a product of McLean Bible Church and the North American Mission Board. And then they hired Clint Clifton, who is more or less a North American Mission Board employee, as essentially the management behind their New City Church planting.
Now, one thing that I remember, zoom back in on the chart, because I want to highlight Kevin Ezell, because I do think this provides a lot of context for this story, because you basically say that in 2016, around that time, McLean Bible Church was decided on becoming a Southern Baptist church.
Yeah, I would say that was before David Platt was hired.
Yes, which would be before David Platt was hired. Kevin Ezell around this time was trying to recruit and court megachurch pastors to join the Southern Baptist Convention. And, that would include like a James McDonald, that would include a couple other high profile figures, Greg Lowry, I want to say, a couple other high profile figures to join the Southern Baptist Convention. So McLean Bible Church, being probably the biggest megachurch in the Washington, D.C. metro area, as far as like celebrity church goes.
Yeah, I don't know what a close second would be.
I mean, maybe there's something out there, but who knows?
But not only that, they're in the richest counties in America.
That's probably the bigger deal, not necessarily the size of the ship, but the motion of the money. And that's the context that I think matters for the North American Mission Board side of things. They were trying to recruit a bunch of mega churches. And this is the story of the McLean Bible Church megachurch and their involvement. So let's just run through the article. You can zoom out of our nice little conspiracy web here.
So we kind of already touched on the lawsuit, but they became an SBC church, and then of course the thing I wanted to focus on is the church planting organization itself, because they basically say over the years they've donated millions to this organization, and then you have mysterious financial transfers, and then of course the connection of Clint Clifton and the SBC entities. So I guess the first object is, let's see what the connection is between Clint Clifton and SBC and NAMB. So just kind of walking through their own lawsuit or the legal filing to, I guess, assess the accuracy of their claims. Of course, I kind of begin the notion that McLean became a SBC church, and this I open up with the notion that they wanted to become an SBC church. That's why they hired David Platt. And then, of course, they had an even Christian Post kind of reported on their financial relationship. So this is 2016. So when the word was that their prior pastor, Solomon, is it Dan Solomon?
Dan or David or something like that, I think.
But yeah, when he left, when he was outgoing, they were beginning their partnership with the North American Mission Board and International Mission Board. So that's when a lot of that began.
So Clint Clifton is the first central figure that you bring up.
Yes, I mean,
Lon Solomon is the name. And Jamie Starfish points out, I grew up in the DC area and visited at MBC many times while Lon Solomon was the teaching pastor. It was a truly fine independent church with excellent teaching and wonderful people. And that's all I've really heard, was that this was an amazing church prior to David Platt, the destroyer of organizations, taking over. Although, as you point out, there were some elders that had their own agenda that wanted to make this a Southern Baptist church. And also pointed out by you is that the elders have had a lot of turnover since 2010. A lot of elders that don't have traditional or as traditional ties to church leadership.
Yeah, and again, that's how you change. I mean, that when you have a turnover like that, that's how you change an organization. So Clint Clifton. So the background on him is he's a pastor of a what's called Pillar Church in Dumfries, Virginia. So that's kind of it's part of what's called the Praetorian Project, and their mission is to plant churches in nearby military installations.
That's such a weird name for an organization, because when you think of Praetorian, you think of the Praetorian Guard of Rome, who generally have a reputation for killing an emperor and then selling the throne to the highest bidder.
Yeah, I mean, it started off good with
it did start off good. And I think America needs some sort of Praetorian Guard. But that's a hot take for another day.
But as you can see, a lot of their
is running with that.
A lot of their locations are going to be in Virginia. Got a little bit in North Carolina, obviously Oceanside, so that's pretty much like San Diego. A lot of military out there. Obviously DC. This one's probably the major one for this article. Woodlawn, Virginia. Again, more California, North Carolina. And then I think they're going into San Antonio again, and then Florida. Again, I think Air Force is on the Panhandle. And obviously Norfolk, that's big military right there. And then, of course, Okinawa, major U.S. military installation. And one thing I point out about the Okinawa branch is it's not necessarily SBC. So,
I don't think the SBC claims churches that are overseas. Like even churches that are planted by NAMB in Canada don't stay SBC churches, which I'm not really sure why, but considering the state of Canada right now, I don't think Canadians would be a conservative voting bloc for the SBC anyway. But
so this organization, it's kind of SBC. This right here is the Baptist Faith and Message as their faith statement, and you'll notice that a lot with a lot of these churches, because that New City Network is partnered with, is that they are more or less SBC in their faith statements, which I don't know if that's just a clause to receive NAMB support, or whether they just do that because, copy and paste a pretty robust faith statement.
Right, and we're going to talk about the faith statement of the New City church planting later in the stream for sure.
But but even on his bio and this is his website as a pastor.
Clifton's.
Yes. So, it says he's a director of research and strategy for the North American Mission Board. Now, the link doesn't actually do anything. It just takes you to the NAMB website for the DC Sun City, which I don't think it has his face on there, but more or less he is an SBC and NAMB employee, and he does write for NAMB, their church planting blog.
Yeah, they have a magazine.
Which, I'll be honest, is kind of cringe. All the church planting advice, it just seems very weird.
It's BuzzFeed-ish. 8 ways to get people to show up on Labor Day weekend or something.
Yeah,
listicles.
It's like the most. I thought men are supposed to be pastors, and it doesn't seem like articles men would read. But
yeah, it's one way to put it. So you talk about this church being or Clifton being just a company man. He's a company man for the North American Mission Board. And then you kind of name drop Ed Stetzer.
So
yes, how does he fit into this picture?
So these are just some of the affiliations he has, and again, I just took from people that were in his Twitter mentions. So you have Ed Stetzer, Kevin Ezel, and Trevin Wax. So again, Ed Stetzer, 9 Marks, is, I guess, big into church planning as well.
And Ed Stetzer's not 9 Marks. Ed Stetzer is Outreach Magazine, Church Leaders, which is underneath that. And he was, I believe, he used to work officially for the Southern Baptist Convention, I think, in some capacity, but no longer anymore. He's gone off and independent, and he's spreading his church growth guru nonsense to a bunch of hyper charismatics, I guess.
And that's where you'll see in the conspiracy chart. So the Lausanne movement is he is their North American ambassador. So basically there's a connection theologically between New City's new theology and Ed Stetzer. And then these two, of course, know each other.
Yeah, we'll talk about the Lausanne movement. I've read that a lot more than I've heard it said, because it doesn't come up often, but you see it in a lot of ministries that are liberally drifting. You see that as their faith statement, which we'll talk about in the towards later in the article, I guess.
So one of the churches, and again, I'm kind of looking through their churches. Some of them are more or less doctrinally SBC, others are not. Again, Pillar DC, which is the Church of Interest, they were actually featured in the Annie Armstrong campaign videos. So a lot of the videos churches might show to get their members to contribute to these offerings, that this church was featured in it. And they doctrinally hold to the New Hampshire Confession of Faith, which is basically like a Calvinist doctrine of faith, though for 1833 it's actually moderately Calvinist, not full blown, even though by today's standards it would be more or less a Calvinist faith statement.
Well, compared to 1689, or
yeah, compared to anything that came before, yes. And the other thing I highlight with the Praetorian Project is that, for a movement that targets military installations and, wants to do this, I don't want to say bootlicking, but let's be honest, they want to appeal to the veterans and service members. They were pretty inactive on the Biden vaccine mandate for the troops. So,
which I do believe just ended.
Officially, yes. But
and I want to say one of the Democrats who voted for that was Ilhan Omar, which is ironic, because it's ironic that she's the most moderate Democrat in Congress.
But pretty much, again, this is a pertinent issue for the military. and their target demographic as far as their target outreach, and they were pretty much radio silence. Like not even like a vaccine exemption letter or something.
Yeah, like John MacArthur was doing that. And so were a few other churches. They were getting really loose about that, and I don't blame them. We'll give you a vaccine exemption card if you ask us for it. And I know we had a template on Evangelical Dark Web for that at the time, just to know, just to share our history on this issue. And you edited one as well.
Yeah. I mean, I edited it to take out language that would make it seem like the vaccine was either safe and effective. So because my premise and thesis would be that it is neither, and that is one reason why you cannot mandate something. But
right.
So then I transitioned from Clifton to New City church planting, which is I basically call a regional NAMB.
So this is where the money is going. Like you're basically saying that MBC, McLean Bible Church, gives money to the North American Mission Board, who gives it back to this joint venture.
Yes, and again, they're also sharing personnel knowledge, so human capital as well with Clint Clifton.
So Clint Clifton is someone in charge of this?
Yes, he's the director.
And he's a NAMB guy.
Yes, so he wears a lot of hats, so good for him. But if you're trying to say that you're not an SBC entity, then not the guy I would hire. But so in 2022, they distanced themselves from NAMB or from McLean Bible Church by saying they matured into an independent autonomous group with an emphasis on training and equipping churches to multiply throughout the country. McLean Bible Church has been an amazing place for this network to grow and send planters, and we are thankful for this incredible partnership over the years. So
that is the church planting organization saying that.
Yes. So they're pretty much saying, yeah, we're branching out on our own now.
Well,
and the whole
what
multiply
could possibly go wrong,
and the whole sending churches to multiply, it's kind of the whole NAMB language, church growth language that you see with a lot of these planting organizations, multiplication, which, a lot of emphasis on that. That's kind of one of their buzzwords. But, I kind of make the case that they did move out of Vienna, Virginia into Washington, D.C. within 2021. And I basically used like the Wayback Machine to, I guess, verify this. Because one of the things I'm trying to do is see if they've received like a financial loan from North American Mission Board. And I can at least prove that by December, they were essentially moved out and moved into Washington, D.C. And of course, if you go back to their archives, they were very forthright that this was a partner organization of the North American Mission Board. So a lot of the badging that they don't have on their website, they used to have a lot of North American Mission Board branding on their website.
So at one point in time, this website had branding from not only the City Church Planting Network, right? Or
New City Church.
New City Church Planting had branding of McLean Bible Church and the North American Mission Board.
I'm mainly emphasizing. I'm not sure how much they had for McLean, but they did have pretty much partnered with the North American Mission Board.
And then, McLean Bible Church would have had New City Church Planting on their website.
Yeah, it's their organization, and they were headquartered in Vienna, so it's basically the HQ church.
And then one of the points that you made, or one of the points that someone else made, I believe it was the guy at Servants and Heralds made, was that this was the same address in Vienna, Virginia.
No. That's where we get more woke connections.
Okay, so I'm jumping ahead.
Yes.
So we have an organization, the joint venture, which has ties to both the North American Mission Board and McLean Bible Church.
Yes. And a lot of
Very
their
complicated conspiracy, but wait, there's more.
and a lot of their churches are going to be, SBC or their partner churches are going to be SBC church plants that are on the Send network, or they're like documented on the map that NAMB has of like all the SBC churches and all the church plants that they have. So, and if you look at the map, you'll actually see a bunch of dots in the Mid-Atlantic area, which kind of makes you wonder, do we really need more church plants, or do we need to equip the churches that are there to expand on their own? But
yeah, I always thought that the North American Mission Board was kind of a cannibalizing organization in some ways. And then you got like the state of West Virginia where there's like little emphasis. But they prefer putting more churches in urban areas.
yeah, and that's, I mean, and even within their partner churches.
So are you trying to click that link or?
Yeah, let me. So if
Okay.
you look at some of their partner churches, this is the current, not the way back, that you'll see, City Church, obviously Pillar Church, King's Church is. I don't even know if this is a church with their church plan or just like one that's partnered. Again, City Light, Redemption City Church, Haven City Church.
So it's like Calvary Chapel, but with city.
Yeah, pretty much.
At least for a lot of these.
And again,
Thirst
a lot of the
Church.
yeah, that was weird.
That's a weird name for a
that's also an
church.
SBC church plant.
So which one of these is not SBC?
I mean, I don't.
Oh, McLean Bible Church is on there.
Yeah, I mean, they're obviously a partner church, like Lake City Church.
So other than McLean Bible Church, potentially, which one of these is not SBC? Any of them come to mind, or?
I'm not sure if that one. I mean, they have. I mean, you'll even see that they have like international. So
Okay, so there's
because the people
Reykjavik, Iceland.
So this is how you know that this is a product of like Clint Clifton, because his Praetorian partner church planning organization, that I guess one of like the pastor at Pillar Church, Dumfries, did IMB work with in Iceland. So that's part of that. That's kind of an influence from his days at the IMB. But and obviously they're trying to branch out into Michigan, Texas, and so where a
So
lot
this
of
is kind of becoming absorbed or very integrated with the Praetorian Project,
I
given
mean
its
as
locations.
I mean I would say a lot of it is they're trying to copy NAM, and obviously Texas, a lot you can do there, which
Since we're on the subject of the churches themselves, what exactly, how solid are these churches?
I mean this one right here, I mean obviously New City Fellowship, right? Pretty obvious name, but so let me
Well, how obvious is it?
well, the director is so the pastor of that church is this guy Choi Rodriguez. So he's the Hispanic director of New City Church Planning.
Okay.
So if you look at his church, so his church is one of the ones identified as woke.
Oh, really?
Yes.
What a shock.
I mean, right here on the first page, we desire to be a diverse community that proclaims the gospel and marks the disciples for the glory of God and the renewal of our city. So again, this emphasis on diversity at the forefront of your messaging is, again, that's where it starts.
Okay, so that's just the front page, and
And
then
as
you
you can
read, or
see,
that's the headline. Here's the article: Sojourn Church. Is that familiar with like Sojourners, the network? And then obviously Acts
it's a.
29 is
I
a
think this
woke,
one's a really small one.
and
It's
then Acts 29 is
so
really
this is
woke.
basically just a Virginia church that's helping them plant. So it's not anything big. I think it was under their vision. It's under their faith statement. But
I mean, they got Mago Day. Usually they might slip things in there. But we don't have to spend that much time on one individual church. But the picture is, some of these churches are woke. You're pointing out that one of the leaders of this organization's church is pretty woke. And that's just on their website. They fail a website test.
yeah, this one would fail the website test. The other one would be Hill City Church, which is also a North American Mission Board church plant. So this one had the Marxist faith statement, and this would be their Imago Day. This is essentially their Imago Day on the.
And let me read it out loud. Every person has inherent dignity because they are made in the image of God. Therefore, must honor and value every individual by being committed to revealing God's character in the broken areas of racial, social, and cultural injustice. As God calls his people to love the orphan, widow, and foreigner, we are called to pursue and serve the marginalized and oppressed as a primary means of honoring God and loving people. Wow, that is some cringe to put in the faith statement on a church website.
Again, they could have just copied like the Imago Day out of the Baptist Faith and Message, but yeah, you might as well have just said social justice, racial justice, and cultural justice. And I don't even know what cultural justice is, other than you hate colonialism. Which
Colonialism's based.
I mean, feel free to live without electricity and plumbing, but
and get out of Virginia or whatever state this is in.
This one's Maryland, right outside DC.
Yeah, you can
College
get out
Park.
of Maryland.
So
College Park. Okay, University of Maryland.
Yes, they
is
target
where College
University of Maryland.
Park is. So,
and obviously, what marginalized could also mean, the
sexual minorities.
Yes,
as they're called. Because after all, and again, I know I already did this video, but if even Doug Wilson is, going side B or has gone side B in the past, wow, we got a lot of work to do on this issue. Just got to say that. So obviously, some of these churches are not solid.
Yeah, I mean, others are plain. Or
you can't tell on a website check, and
yeah,
and then we got the next section, which focuses on the Bank of NAMB.
So,
unless there's something you want to highlight.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about the wokeness, I mean, so one thing that the Mass Baptists, and this is over at Servants and Heralds,
right?
So,
Servants and Herald also does good work in the discernment world.
They connected New City Network to Duke Kwan, who's basically your woke PCA pastor that's located in the DC area. So he runs what's called Grace Meridian, which again, it's your typical woke PCA church. I think one of their locations actually has a mask mandate still, or at least that's what's listed on their website. So basically, this guy's more or less openly side B. He also lamented the departure of Greg Johnson from the PCA. And basically,
now is he the guy that was like in charge of the National Association of Evangelicals?
That I don't know, but because I wasn't too familiar with him before. I mean, they link him. Basically, their assertion is that NAMB is sending money to New City Network, and then New City Network is basically now in a relationship and affiliated with Duke Kwan because they have the same office space. Because when they moved out of Virginia, they moved into Washington, D.C., and they moved into a building that was the same as New City Network, or as Duke Kwan's mailing address. So you'll kind of see.
I'm sorry. Walter Kim is the PCA guy who's the president of the National Association of Evangelicals.
They're not all alike.
They don't all look alike, and they don't all have the same names. I just want to be honest about that.
So you'll see 637.
Apologize for my white gaze.
So 637 Indiana Avenue, New City Church Planning.
Right.
And then 637 Indiana Avenue, Northwest. It's the same location.
Right. And Duquan, as we've established, is like the heavily woke guy
Yes.
in PCA.
So
That's not Walter Kim.
So it's essentially, the story is that they're sharing office space, and let me see if I can pull up and this is their office space.
Potbellies?
Yeah,
A sandwich shop?
It's like the second or third floor of the sandwich shop of a deli.
That's the office space?
Yes, that's the office. That's the address.
Okay. And this is in DC?
Yes.
Okay.
So nothing to see there.
Can't say I'm a huge fan of Potbellies.
So basically, you have a connection, again, going back up to the flow chart. So we have the connection to the Praetorian Project, which, again, they're also funneling money and connections. And now we have the connection between Duquan and,
which is the
course,
location.
A direct connection from North American Mission Board. So yes, they're sharing the same office space, or at least a mailing address. But because it's a mailing address, that means you can get a loan. And that loan would be registered under DC, because if we go back to April 2022, we talked about how NAMB had 4 loans in Washington, DC, totaling $4.3 million. So the question is, who are they lending an average of $1.1 million to? Because again, that's a substantial loan. That's a substantial average. And again, NAMB actually reports state which accounts for more than 5% of their book. So that's generally like larger states, Ohio, Texas, or California, Colorado. So
Colorado.
Typically, yes. Because I guess they're doing a lot more planting there.
Yeah, in the Denver area. They got to get the white women of Boulder, Colorado on board with the church.
So again, now we figure out, we might actually understand who these 4 loans are given to. So we have New City Church Planning. Again, they have an address in the District of Columbia. They were relocated to DC in 2021, and maybe they got some capital to help the transition. And again, they have the affiliations with Clint, Clifton to substantiate a financial relationship, like a loan.
Okay, so that's one possibility.
And the other would be they lent money to Pillar Church DC, because this church actually purchased a $2.5 million property in DC. And that sale closed in September of 2021, which would still put it within the fiscal year for NAMB. So a $2.5 million loan, that's obviously it's double the average, and it's a pretty substantial loan. And, it's a legitimate building, as far as it was a previous, I guess, Baptist church relocated out of DC. They sold their building, and this church, Pillar Church DC, moved in. So, and I guess the issue isn't that they necessarily got a loan. It's that, one, you have a conflict of interest with Clint Clifton and his Praetorian Project, and NAMB lending a church $2.5 million for its building, which, again, they're not necessarily lending that kind of money to most churches. 2, it is a location in DC, so very heavy real estate market, a lot of scrutiny that can go there for any sort of real estate purchases. But between like the conflict of interest, some people might object to the fact, or to the nature of a loan. But the other thing is that a loan of this magnitude should be disclosed to Southern Baptist, I guess, members. So the Baptist should know who is getting that kind of money.
Yeah, and you said the average of the loans was like $4 million a piece, average of a loan. And if one church is getting $1 million loans, that's kind of a big deal. And you're saying that not only could New City Church Planting have received a loan from the North American Mission Board,
well, I think Pillar is
Pillar Church.
I would say Pillar is the likeliest the likeliest suspect as far as the borrowers go.
Right.
And
And
again,
until we get something like a financial disclosure out of the North American Mission Board, there's no way to know this for certain, which is a
or the
frustration.
or the individual church itself, but
Right.
and that's a nicer building than like a lot of the other pillar churches have too, because I think Clifton's church is out of like a middle school,
It's not in the
and they
sandwich
got
shop also.
no, they're in Dumfries, Virginia. So but that's probably the nicest location of any of the pillar church plants.
Okay, so now we're kind of moving into the Lausanne Covenant commitment, as I'm
Yeah,
not great at pronouncing because I've only really read it.
so they kind of have an ironic phrase on their messaging that New City Church Planting has reinvigorated itself with a commitment to serve gospel-hearted, multiplication-minded churches from a variety of denominational streams within the clear Orthodox doctrinal framework of the Lausanne Covenant. And it's kind of like it's almost oxymoronic that this is a clear Orthodox doctrinal framework, but and again, to give you some history, the International Congress on World Evangelicalism convened in 1974, and this is where the doctrine was decided and kind of crafted. And John Stott is I guess, the chief proponent. He's kind of the leader of the movement, or was. And so I guess some fun facts is I think he was like the chaplain for Queen Elizabeth, and he actually was pretty anti-Israel, so I'll give him some credit there. And then I kind of came across that he might have wavered on annihilationism.
Well, if he was British, maybe he wanted to not end, British colonialism. But I think I'm hoping too much, trying to give him too much base credentials.
So this is kind of the history, and then they've kind of met a couple more times since. Their next movement is in 2024, and I think it'll be in Korea. And within America, you have John Mark Comer, whose church holds to it, and then
Yeah,
Acts,
and that
and then
comes from
Acts.
and you linked that from my research I did on John Mark Comer in 2020. So it's been a while since I've touched John Mark Comer. Maybe I should go back and give that verdict that I wrote an update, because there's a lot of shadiness surrounding him that I've seen since. He's very mystical. Uh, Hangs out with JD Greer, which is a negative sign, and then the Lausanne Covenant is just all sorts of red flags,
Yeah, I
as
mean, and
we're
then you
about to
have
point out.
Acts 29. So a lot of people, when they talk about like the drift of Acts 29, obviously, Matt Chandler's part of it. Eric Mason's Woke Church was promoted by that organization. I know what Redeemer Fellowship KC, that was Acts 29, right? And then
Uh, I want to say yes.
of course Driscoll, like he was Acts 29, right?
Yes, yes, he
So I
was.
mean, when you got a lot of these, you know,
I think he was their founder.
so a lot of out there personalities have been more or less planted by Acts 29, and then they hold to the Lausanne Covenant, which
Now, how long have they held to that?
I don't know, but they make it seem very foundational. On If you go to Acts 29's website, uh,
Okay,
I mean,
I'll take your word for it.
I mean,
And you,
they put it like front and center that we affirm the Lausanne Covenant and the five distinctives. So it's pretty up front and center as far as their beliefs go.
okay,
And again, within the American movement, this goes back to Ed Stetzer, and they're very much open borders policy. They don't want border security, and there's some. I mean, it's more of an international thing than a domestic thing, which is why I might be skeptical. Is why is this doctrine being used for a church planting organization instead of one that's more American I guess it's theology or background. Again, like the New Hampshire Confession or the
Okay.
Baptist
Yeah.
Faith and Message.
Yeah.
But I
So
mean,
just as a quick fact check, Mark Driscoll was the founder of Acts 29 in 1998. So just a quick fact check there.
so then, I mean, the big problem child within the Lausanne Covenant is Article 5, which is entitled Christian Social Responsibility, which, I mean, I kind of do a little fun fact where, social responsibility in business is basically where the concept of ESG comes from, because it's all about social responsibility and, corporate citizenship. So every business student in America probably learns about social responsibility, and you just throw Christian in front of it.
Right. Because Christianity is a value proposition to a bunch of these people.
I don't know if you want to read the article itself, but the sections in it, which pretty much are the problem sections.
Now, I got to ask real quick, is Duke Kwan related to Ryan Kwan?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I,
if it's like a,
he's on Acts 29. So I'm not trying to say, I'm not trying to get my Asians confused again,
I
but
mean, maybe it's like a Kim thing.
okay, yeah, I can read this. Article 5. We affirm that that God is both creator and the judge of all men. We therefore should share his concern for justice and reconciliation throughout human history and for the liberation of men and women of every kind of oppression. Because men and women are made in the image of God, every person, regardless of race, religion, color, culture, class, sex, or age, has an intrinsic dignity because of which he or she should be respected and served, not exploited. Here too we express penitence both for our neglect for having sometimes regarded evangelism and social concern as mutually exclusive. Although reconciliation with other people is not reconciliation with God, nor is social action evangelism, nor is political liberation salvation. Nevertheless, we affirm that evangelism and socio political involvement are both part of our Christian duty, for both are necessary expressions of the doctrines of God and men, our love for our neighbor, and our obedience to Jesus Christ. The message of salvation implies also a message of judgment upon every form of alienation, oppression, and discrimination, and we should not be afraid to denounce evil and injustice wherever they exist. When people receive Christ, they are born again into his kingdom and must seek not only to exhibit, but also to spread its righteousness in the midst of an unrighteous world. The salvation we claim should be transforming us, and the totality of our personal and social responsibilities. Faith without works is dead. So, Article 5, that's some cringe. That
Yeah, I
is
mean,
like liberation theology of the 1970s, basically tampered down for mass appeal, I guess.
I just kind of say this phrasing is so vague that you can justify just about any movement using this language. Critical race theory. Oh yeah, it's about oppression and you know no. I mean, they'd have no problem with this language because it's about
I mean,
alienation, oppression,
you
and
say that they have no problem in this language, but I might take that up a notch. They're relying on this language for cover. Like
yeah. I
this
mean,
language was intended to give them cover.
and again, it can cover just about anything. Communism could technically do this because they're helping out the workers from the
Workers of the
oppression.
world unite.
Yeah. Um, so I mean, there's really, I mean, again, uh, I mean, what is oppression? What is alienation? What is discrimination? I mean, these three things. I mean, essentially this relies on secular understanding of terms to form your theology, because
Alienation is pretty much a secular term.
I mean, and again, are there not things that should be alienated, oppressed, and discriminated against? I mean, obviously, there's something called shame that we've kind of lost in our society, but you're supposed to kind of shame behaviors that you do not want in your society. Again, this easily lends itself to side B. You can't discriminate against two dudes that want to get married. That's discrimination. That's oppression. You're alienating them from society
and the
and
church.
so, and again, they might say reproductive justice, i.e., abortion. So, I mean, any
A
any
lot of
ideology.
euphemisms can be made out of that.
Yeah, and again, I compare that to the Baptist faith and message because there is a counter. Because if you look at the Baptist faith and message, you have social order, which it functions as the same thing. I won't say same thing, but it functions as a similar article in Christian and social order, while actually listing out what things should be banned and what things should be opposed: racism, greed, selfishness, vice, all forms of sexual immorality, including adultery, homosexuality, and pornography. Providing for the orphan, the needy, the abused, aged, helpless, and the sick. And then we should speak on behalf of the unborn. So again, sanctity of human life is included in your
From conception to natural death.
yes. So, and again, on a global scale, abortion is prevalent when you have a lot of Planned Parenthood activity in Africa. Obviously, you have a lot of, like, if you go to Russia, which is one of the higher abortion per capita, obviously China with one child. So the idea of actually putting abortion in your faith statement versus the Lausanne Covenant, which could pretty much be used to justify abortion or protecting it. So but again, you go from the Baptist faith and message on Christian and social order to the Lausanne Covenant on Christian social responsibility. That is a liberal drift. That is pretty much as liberal drift as you can get without outright taking off the mask.
Yeah, without going full Episcopalian. So, and that is what City Church Planting Network has done.
Yes. And again, as the Lausanne Covenant would eventually do from Article 5, is they would eventually adopt the Manila Manifesto, which would kind of consolidate some of the language a bit. I mean, it's still very unclear on the language regarding justice. And then they add the Cape Town Commitment, which is 2010.
They're just naming things off of all these places in the world that they
Yes.
go to, because no faith statement or declaration is really meaningful unless it's named after a town. That's just a fact. Yeah, go Frankfurt Declaration, go not Nashville Statement, because apparently Nashville Statement's not based enough, and then the Dallas Statement. So
the other thing is that by the time you get to 2010, or you have what's called the Cape Town Commitment, and that is, let me see if I can pull it up. It actually,
take your time.
so yeah, let me.
Okay, so this is Cape Town Commitment.
Yes.
Let me guess.
So this
Climate
is
change.
yes. We love God's world.
Oh,
So
man,
by
I
the
called
time you get
that.
to 2010, you have climate change now in your faith statement. So basically, everything becomes the gospel issue, which means that there's no such thing as a gospel issue because everything's a gospel issue. I'm not sure if it was this one that had the AIDS reference. Me. So yeah, you also have HIV.
Really?
Yes.
Does it presuppose that AIDS is existent and prevalent in Africa? Just wondering.
It's probably because of African AIDS, which, might be a canard, but, read up on RFK if you want to learn about Africa and AIDS and Anthony Fauci. But basically, this is a liberal evangelical movement.
So it's basically like the National Association of Evangelicals, but they're a faith statement for them. But the NAE doesn't actually use this faith statement. Ironically, I just checked. But that's what this organization sounds like. And to me, maybe this is like an automatic red flag. You're a false teacher, John Mark Comer, and I need to update that. article like ASAP.
Again, compare that to the Baptist faith in Massachusetts, the New Hampshire Covenant, are basically a better theological faith statement. And yeah, you can tell that this is a more liberal. It's also very globalistic. So again, instead of modeling themselves after the North American Mission Board, New City is essentially going to become a Acts 29. And
That's
people,
worse.
yeah, and people of McLean Bible Church should probably be informed that your church is going to be planting more liberal churches in the future. So, I mean, if you're looking at the flow chart, you got the money coming in. Obviously, money comes around. They're connected to the Praetorian Project, who, again, also receiving money from NAMB. And now you got Ed Stetzer, Lausanne Covenant, and Liberal Drift. And again, there's other organizations like Acts 29 could probably be put here as far as, or here as it's adjacent in ideology. So.
And that's the angle that people aren't talking about with this story, is that McLean Bible Church is actually worse for actually disaffiliating with the Southern Baptist Convention. At least on paper, they're disaffiliating. They're actually worse. And
Yeah,
this is continued downgrade.
Yeah, I mean, so now again, if they're planning millions of dollars in this, that means they're going to be planning millions of dollars into these churches. And it might not happen. They might not be doing woke church every week or every year, but in a couple years, a good percentage of the churches they might be planting might be woke, and then they might be using North American Mission Board money to do that. So again, NAMB is going to be bolstering their numbers through New City, planting churches without necessarily faithful or strong theological fortitude.
Right, and that takes us to the end.
Yeah, and again, I kind of make I don't want to say defense of David Platt, but I pretty much say that a lot of this was in motion for him. He's kind of the product of this, not necessarily the leader. He's not the visionary of McLean becoming an SBC church.
Or he was brought on to be the visionary for this vision.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then the alternative is he was hired to do a job, and he's doing that job. Except, like with other organizations that David Platt has run, he's running them into the ground.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're a ways off from knowing whether they're, how McLean has been doing in 2022, but I mean, and then I posit that the nature of the lawsuit is kind of unlikely to be successful, just because you're undoing years of church polity, and judges are going to be reluctant to engage in an ecclesiastical dispute, even if it's a direct violation of written bylaws.
It's a tough sell for that reason. The lawsuit's a tough sell, so I'm not sure it'll work. I believe it failed the last time because of these reasons, or at least the first lawsuit was dismissed on these grounds. This second lawsuit, it has to overcome those grounds. And it's a little less wonky. It's a lot more straightforward to prove that they weren't supposed to be fooling around with denominations. But yeah, so that does take us to the end of the article, and we do have some time on our hands.
I guess the one issue I wanted to address is, is there maybe too much emphasis on church planting? And, again, I made the argument a while back. Churches should be investing in schools, not necessarily missions, or
schools are missions, and that's the point that you're trying to make.
But yeah, leave the SBC, plant a school instead. Because if you want to grow your church, then yeah, educational resources are a great way to do that, because a lot of parents and stuff, people like that, are going to be looking for childcare, or they're looking for a church that has avenues for their children. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said critiquing the lack of family integrated worship, but that's just what a lot of church hunters will look for. But if you have a educational program whether it just be hosting co-ops for homeschool or even owning your school outright, because we talked about like Calvary Chapel, that those go a long way to helping not only the individual church grow, but fueling Christian education for children in America, especially when schools are overrun by liberals.
And the point that he's making, or the point of this article, as I recall, this was a SBC exit article. The idea
Yes.
that leave the SBC, take that money you were giving to the cooperative program and invest it in your own schools.
Yeah, because
and investigate in educating children where you're at, because you
because
give it to NAMB, you don't know where that money's going to go. You give it to the seminaries, you don't know what they're going to teach
you can
or
kind of see
allow
it
to be taught.
when you have states that are suffering like 9% and 8.6, or cities that
I
actually.
mean, we know what the ERLC is going to do with that money.
So if you
Run
got
a blog.
states that are actually seeing decline, that's people that are taking their kids out of public schools. So their kids still got to be educated somehow. So that's where the church can step in and fill that void. And yeah, when you're looking at churches that say that they donate like 11% of their money towards the cooperative program or SBC entities, that's kind of the argument, is you can use this money towards educational resources instead. And again, for each church that's going to look different.
Yeah. And, just to talk about the subject of the book that I'm writing, I make an argument about planting churches locally, that we should be more locally focused on church planting efforts. That way there's more accountability. There's more assistance you can provide. Just a lot of benefits to focusing on local church plantings, local churches focusing and cooperating together on this. I think that's more of a solution than sending your money to a national organization that will maybe distribute it to help you out locally, but probably not, because Kevin Ezell is what I call the Phantom Menace of the Southern Baptist Convention. He's a kingmaker. He's pulling a lot of strings because he holds the purse. He's just following the golden rule, which is he who has the gold makes the rules. And that's how the Southern Baptist Convention operates, is through the golden rule. So that's why you had J.D. Greear, who was, I believe, one of the beneficiaries of NAMB's real estate play. That's why you had Ed Litton, who I believe was North American Mission Board. And that's also why you have Bart Barber in there now. Not because he's necessarily a NAMB guy, but because he's an establishment player. He's there to play ball. And he wants to be with the cool kids. And it shows. So that does appear to wrap up our David Platt MBC episode. It's good to have this type of material out there, because, again, I thought the article was really good. It did really well on Twitter. Bobby Gilstrap, to give him a shout out, promoted your article, by the way. And it doesn't, and it's weird how on this article the site metrics didn't match the other metrics that I saw that said that this article was outperforming it, which is usually backwards. But I'm explaining technical stuff, I guess. So anyway, any last call, questions, concerns, comments? Share them now while I put them in. And I just want to let you know, a way you can support Evangelical Dark Web is at evangelicaldarkweb.org/join. It's a Patreon-like system that helps keeps the lights on at this ministry effort. We don't really take money from it. We're all volunteers here. But coming up, we do have a book launch that will hopefully happen in 2023 on this book that I'm working on. It's finished, and we're trying to shop a publisher. So that's the stages that we're at right now. And it's called Winning Not Winsome. And I think it's the perfect title. It's the anti-Big Eva book. And supporters are going to have early access or whatever to that material as well. So there's some extra incentive and excitement to help support. But otherwise, I didn't see any questions roll in. Have a blessed day. Drop a like button on your way out. That's the equivalent of tip your waitress. And we will catch you on the next one.